Friends in Christ, I hope that you have been able to enjoy some of the beautiful weather that we have had lately. It feels like spring is really on its way, which is so good for all of our spirits. And our spirits could still use some lifting right now, right? What a hard time this has been in our lives as individuals and as a congregation. I feel like that is a statement that I have made on repeat for the last 12 months, but that's because it continues to be true. And by now, we are all so tired in ways that we know and in ways that honestly we're not even really aware of. We are stretched to breaking point by forces beyond our control. We have been asked in this past year to deal with situations and decisions that we never imagined, much less prepared for. And the constant change, stress, grief, anger, frustration, they have worn on many of us. As a congregation, we are continuing to try to respond faithfully, wisely, and compassionately to the circumstances that we find ourselves in. I know things have changed many times in this past year about how we are worshiping, and it can be hard to keep up. And I know some of you have questions about what's going on and why and what to expect. And so I wanted to just take a few minutes to address some of those. I know there is some confusion as to what our decision-making process has been this year. We are part of the Lower Susquehanna Synod of the ELCA. Our synod staff, led by our bishop, have from the beginning done everything that they can to support their leaders and congregations, in part by providing us with well-researched information and guidance, including recommendations from the bishop on what safe worship practices look like at any given time during the pandemic. Bishop Dunlop has not, however, mandated our decisions. That's not how the ELCA works. You may remember that the Congregation's Council formed a COVID-19 task force late last spring. This group of people has met throughout the year to address the latest data about how widespread the virus is in our area, what the recommendations from expert public health officials are, what the state is mandating, what the bishop is recommending. And based on this information, which is the best we have at any given time, the task force has made recommendations to the council about whether or not we should gather in person, and if we do, what the parameters should be to minimize the risk of spreading the virus. The council has then taken those recommendations into consideration and ultimately has voted to uphold and implement them. At times, that has meant that we gathered only outdoors or only worshiped in our homes, making use of the online options if we were able to do that. When we have been in the building in the fall and again now in the spring, we have gathered with a particular set of safety precautions. First, when we gather, we wear masks over our mouths and noses. Studies have shown that properly fitting masks decrease the spread of the virus. Because they are especially helpful, but not perfect, in preventing a person with the virus from transmitting it to someone else, wearing a mask is a way of showing love for our neighbor, in case we should happen to have the virus without knowing it. But masks have also been shown to provide some protection for the person wearing the mask from breathing in virus particles. Second, we are not touching shared objects or each other. We're not shaking hands or passing an offering plate, and as much as possible, we are keeping doors open so people can pass through freely. Third, we're not singing in worship. And I know this is hard. Music and lifting up our voices in song, it's such a central part of our worship experience. But singing has been shown to project virus particles much further than normal speaking, and much further than the 6-foot distance that we usually keep from one another. Even with masks, the aerosolized tiny particles that we produce when we sing can escape from our masks with our breathing. And so for right now, and definitely not forever, it is safer not to sing in the church. Number 4, we maintain 6 feet between ourselves and people who do not live in our households. We have marked spaces in the pews where households can safely sit. And this was done with a lot of care, measuring 6 feet, not only from the people who would be sitting beside us, but from those who would sit behind us or in front of us. And I acknowledge that this is one of the hardest things for many of us. It feels so uncomfortable to sit where someone directs us or without being able to worship close to other people. But 6 feet between households complies with the best public health expertise. And the household category is important. We are already likely sharing our germs with those in our households. The ones who are outside of our households are the ones that we are at risk of infecting or being infected by if someone is carrying the virus but not showing symptoms, which happens quite often. One exception to this that we have made here in the sanctuary is for extended family, if they have already been inside each other's bubble, so to speak. So for example, if grandparents and grandchildren are seeing each other indoors in their homes, then they can still sit together at church. 5th, we register to attend worship, and we check people in as they arrive. This was implemented with a dual purpose. One is to ensure that we don't have more people attend than we have safe seating for. And the other is to have an accurate list of who was at worship in case we need to contact people in the event of learning that someone has tested positive who had been at worship. 6th, we shorten the length of the service to minimize the amount of time that we are in an enclosed space breathing the same air. And last, between services, we open the windows to air out the space, and we also use our sanitizing equipment to clean the surfaces. And to be honest, people in our congregation have responded in a whole variety of ways to these parameters for gathering. For some, gathering with others indoors seems like too great a risk, regardless of the precautions, so they have continued to worship at home, often using the video options or the call-in service. Others are coming to worship inside because the precautions that we have allow them to feel safe in doing so. Still others are coming to indoor worship even though they don't agree with all the precautions because they're willing to tolerate them in order to come to church. And others have felt that these precautions interfere too much with their worship or conflict too much with their beliefs and have chosen to stay away. That's a lot of complexity about what people are thinking and feeling and expecting and hoping for. And we've made it through a year of it already. God's grace has sustained us and held us together. Friends, we're at a tricky time in the course of this pandemic right now. We are feeling some hopefulness as more people get vaccinated and as the numbers of infections and deaths decrease from the terrible highs that they reached this winter. It seems that the grip of the virus is weakening. But it is not gone. It is still spreading in our communities, no matter how ready we are to be done with it. I so deeply want us to be able to gather normally again that I do not want us to let up our caution too soon, such that the spread of the virus once again climbs in our communities, which would just prolong the time until we can finally come out of this nightmare. With light at the end of the tunnel, I hope my neighbors will join me in still being careful so that we can keep taking steps forward and not have to go backward first again. I believe that it is worth these efforts to keep our sanctuary from being a space where the virus spreads, even to one person. The grief for me and for our community if one of our beloved members got sick or even died because they came to worship would be such a blow for us all. There's also the reality that we are a public space with responsibility to our community. We might feel that we, as individuals, are willing to take some risks, like worshiping without masks or sitting wherever and beside whomever we choose to. But these choices have the potential to impact people who didn't agree to that risk. Someone infected in our church could go out and spread the virus to others, putting webs of people in danger and risking taxing our medical system. Now, perhaps that sounds alarmist and overblown, but it is exactly how the virus spreads. I believe that caution, even extreme caution at times, is one way we show love to our neighbors in this time. Now, that said, the leaders of the congregation are continuing to assess and reassess as the conditions change. We will keep looking for ways that we can relax, things we can adjust. Here are a few examples. People have wondered about Easter, if they are worshiping with extended family, if they can sit together. Yes, even if these are not folks that you see regularly, if you're going to be spending the day with them anyway, you can sit together in worship. I just ask that you pay attention to spacing, keeping bigger groups in the center of the pews that are marked for bigger groups, and the ends of the alternate pews for groups of 1 or 2, so that we maintain our 6 feet of distance. Also, with the weather warming up, we're going to be offering outdoor services where we will start singing, as long as we still have our masks on. We have the 9:30 outdoor service on Easter, and an indoor, and beginning on May 2nd, we will have an outdoor service at 8 a.m. and an indoor service at 9:15 a.m. every Sunday. We might remove the need to register for worship at some point in the near future, given that we have not had issues with exceeding capacity in the sanctuary. And we're paying attention to what the science is saying about how things might change as more folks are vaccinated and as the levels of the virus in the community go down. When the risk seems low enough, we will adapt again. Friends, we can do this. I know we can. None of this is forever. God's love for us will continue to sustain us, and our love for one another will give us strength. What I would ask is that we keep talking to each other and keep listening deeply, and that we give each other the benefit of the doubt. Let's begin with the assumption that we all want to be faithful and all want what's best for the congregation. We just have different opinions about what that looks like sometimes. For me, all of these decisions are grounded in what I believe is the high call as disciples of Jesus to love our neighbor, the neighbors sitting beside us and the ones we don't even know out in our community, and to follow Jesus, who is always seeking out first those who are vulnerable. My thoughts are also rooted in my belief that God works for abundant life through all kinds of means, including the scientific, medical, and public health knowledge of experts in their fields, and that as such, we should not dismiss those gifts. I also believe that trusting God means believing not just that God will keep us safe, but that God in Christ walks with us even when the way seems dark and we feel the weight of that cross we are carrying. New life is coming. That's what God does. As we journey together through this Holy Week, let's remember that we are walking not only to the cross, but to the empty tomb. Friends in Christ, you are in my heart and in my prayers. If you have questions about our practices, or you want to process what you're feeling or struggling with or grieving, please don't hesitate to let me know. Let's all continue to carry each other through this, finding our unity and our hope in Christ Jesus. Peace be with you.